I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag,
Flag
United States of America.
and
and to the
There you go.
republic for which it stands, one nation,
Nation under
under
God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
and
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice for all.
justice.
for all.
Can we get a roll call to establish a quorum? Sorry, so
I call your district, please state your name, so we have that for record. Afton,
Kenny Edgar here.
thank you. Bayless,
Shannon Kohler,
thank you. Brentwood. Brentwood. Okay. Clayton. Clayton. Ferg Floor, here, Kevin Martin. Hancock Place,
Garrett Mace.
thank you. Hazelwood. Hazelwood. Jennings. Jennings, I know we have a new representative from Jennings. Jennings, okay. Kirkwood. Kirkwood. Ladue,
Keisha Lee.
thank you. Lindbergh,
Jennifer Miller,
thank you. Maple Richmond Heights,
Linda Robinson,
thank you. Melville,
Patrick McKelvey Mobile.
thank you. Normandy. Normandy. Parkway,
Hey, Kevin, let me interrupt you. This is Chad Kavanaugh from Kirkwood. I am here. For some reason, it was muted.
thank you, Chad. Kirkwood is here, Rita, just so you got that. And Melville's here as well. It looks like I see the picture. We got
That is
Melville,
true.
so we left
Yes.
off at Normandy one more time. Okay, Parkway,
Debbie Hopper here.
thank you. Pattonville. Pattonville. Rittner,
Jennifer Lonis, I'm here.
thank you. Riverview Gardens,
Veronica Morrow Real, I'm here.
thank you. Rockwood. Rockwood. U City,
Joanne Suda, present.
thank you. Valley Park.
Jeremy here.
Webster Groves.
Sarah's here.
And I believe that's everyone, Rita. And I think we have a quorum.
Yes, we have a quorum.
Perfect. Can we get a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting?
So moved. Afton.
second Lindbergh.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, next, can we get a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting?
Veronica Morrow Real, Riverview Gardens, I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Veronica. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Debbie. That's Debbie Hopper of Parkway. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
Aye.
All right, we have approval for the minutes. Do we have any public speakers? We're to the public comment period.
None were submitted.
Okay, rolling right along. We have our report from our Parent Advisory Council.
Good evening. I will wait for them to pull that up because I don't remember what Dr. Carter sent me. My name is Rob Eaton and I am the PAC Vice President. Dr. Carter is not able to be with us tonight, so I will be filling in for her. So tonight we will present to you the kind of the midway portion of our year for the Parent Advisory Council. Next slide, please. Go ahead. So as a reminder for everybody, Dr. Kamisha Carter is our chapter president. I'm Rob Eaton is vice president. Melissa Upchurch is our recording secretary. Denise Bursey is our corresponding secretary. And Latricia Clark is our parliamentarian. Next slide. Go ahead. So we had a couple focus areas for our partnering districts that we have spent some time focusing on and working on this year. One of our goals was to address the challenges that our families have shared with us in different breakout groups through PAC and different conversations. Go ahead. There were 4 areas that we were focusing on for the 2022-2023 school year. Our first area was, go ahead, parent voice. Second was equity and spacing. Our third was compliance, and fourth was equity and understanding the IEP SPED process. Go ahead. So focus area number 1, the SSD PAC wanted parents to have a voice, not only in the public comments, but at the table where discussions were being made. And as we have talked with the last PRC and having conversations with Dr. Keenan, we are seeing that being already changing shape and having our leadership meetings where we're bringing all sides together, both the school board, the governing council, and the PAC, where we're able to come and have open conversations with everybody. Go ahead. Our focus area number 2 was equity and spacing. The SSD PAC is asking partner districts to look at their spacing of self-contained classrooms and classrooms that are inclusive. So we're hearing some changes, still lots of work that needs to be done on that and having some more open and honest conversations about it. Just kind of as we're seeing things as we go around and having conversations with parents, some things have been brought up here and there, but for the most part, we're seeing some good changes and we're very happy with what we're seeing going on. Focus area number 3. Go ahead. Yeah, you can keep going. We're good. Keep going. Dr. Carter is a little more long-winded than I am. SSD PAC is asking the partnering districts to hold up their end of the bargain for compliance and being sure that if a student is being offered services, if the student deserves services, that those services are being offered and taken care of, and that we're not fighting to have those done. Parents aren't feeling like they're beating their heads against walls as we're trying to provide all the resources to our students. Go ahead. Part of that was equity and understanding the partnership agreement that is signed every year. So we want our partner districts to understand it is a dual responsibility between both districts. A lot of times what parents are hearing is, well, that's special school district, and what special school district is saying, well, that's your partnering district. Bottom line is there are students. They just receive additional services from special school district, and we need to be sure that every opportunity is being offered to them so they can become the men and women that they are created to be. Go ahead. Go ahead. And then equity and understanding the IEP. Some of that had to do with both the school teams from the districts. One of the concerns that we were hearing over and over was particular districts that were not sending everybody to the table. So then you'd have some people at the table, some weren't. Then some people were handling discipline differently than what an IEP said. And well, that's not the way we should have done it. And so there was just becoming a lot of tension that was going on and students being reprimanded and disciplined in ways that shouldn't have been done. So one of our goals was to be sure that we were understanding the IEP process from all sides, whether that be special school district, whether that be the partnering districts, and be sure that we're offering those services and being sure that those students are offered all availability. Go ahead. Go ahead. And you can go ahead. Go ahead. So one of our asks was to communicate. And we said that to our parents also. Sometimes they were just like myself, afraid to speak up, afraid to say something. And so they were a little more timid in saying what they believed they needed. And so we were asking both sides, the special school district, the partnering districts, and the parents to all communicate with each other. If we hear the need, we see the need, we collaborate with our families about that need, and being sure that each student was offered whatever it was that they needed so that they could grow in their education. Go ahead. We have had, I'm thinking that there was different slides that should have been shown tonight, because those were not the slides that were shared with me. But we have had many conversations with the partnering districts and special school district and seeing some great strides. Again, there's lots of work to do, but we're seeing that partnership come together where it's more open and honest. So that concludes that portion. Do we have any questions?
Garrett Meets Hancock Place. You stated that you identified specific districts that you're dealing with on this issue. Is the SSD approaching this, in a proactive, if they're not getting the right answers from the district, are you communicating with the parents and then trying to resolve, be mediator through this, or what is the end game on communicate, because internally you don't even have the right slides that you're aware of. So I'm just trying to figure out where the breakdown on communication really is.
All and. So yes, we are working with those parents and trying to point them in directions at their school level of who they should be talking to, getting them, making sure that as PAC, we have really put a focus on trying to create those PACs in each school district and offering services to help start those, giving them ways that other PACs are doing it so that they understand who their case managers are, who their coordinators are, who their district partner is, and being able to then come back to them and say, okay, have you reached out to X, Y, and Z? Yes, we have. Or no, we haven't. Okay, then before we go any further, you need to reach out to this person. And then if they've exhausted all of those opportunities, then coming back to SSD and sitting down and reaching out to, Dr. Keenan, Ms. Pendergrass, and saying, okay, who do we point them in the direction of, and how do we get these questions answered and help available to them? So we have been playing that mediator to at least get them in the place of the right people to talk to.
Right, because we have organizers and coordinators within each district. I'm just curious as to where the breakdown is. Are the SSD coordinators not communicating well with the district on what you're providing, or is it that the students within the districts aren't being tested properly to qualify or fit within the IEP structure?
That's not, I'm sorry, go ahead. You were cutting out.
No, that's okay. Maybe I'm in a little bit in the weeds here. I just, I'll acquiesce to the fact that I might be in the weeds a little bit here, but.
No problem.
If you don't mind, this is Shakita Moore, Chief Officer of Partner Districts, and I would like to just give an update as to the status and the work that has taken place with each of the 22 partner districts. If you don't mind allowing me to share screen, I would like to share with everyone an agenda. This is our universal agenda that is taken by each of our directors to lead conversations in each of our partner districts. And our focus is on all of the pieces that has been discussed today, in addition to other components. And so at the start of the year, myself, along with both superintendents in each of the partner districts, our director, as well as the partner district liaison and any other members of leadership in that district, we all sit down with this set agenda. And this meeting is led by each of our directors. We are able to ask clarifying questions. It's an opportunity for us to really engage deep into each of these areas that you see before you listed here. And as you can see, space allocation is number 11. But also Parent Advisory Council is 16. And it's not just a conversation. We want them to bring detailed information to talk to us about what the status of each of these areas are in that district, and for us to have some collaborative conversations about where we need to go. These same components, to some extent, are also included in our partnership agreement. that is presented to each of our partner districts at the start of the year. Prior to the end of October, that information is shared back with us. And us is Dr. Keenan, the superintendent, as well as our leadership team to review, but also to take a look at each of these areas from the perspective of the partnership agreement and how they have been rated. So there is an assessment piece that goes along with it. We do know that in those districts where there may be issues with space allocation, it's not just specific to special school district and the services we provide. Many of them may be impacted across the board as a result of not having adequate space, or the need for them to take a look at the allocation of space for everyone. So those are pieces that are not just specific to special school district, but of course, we let them know that this is the most vulnerable group of students that we may see in a school district, and we want to ensure that the services that they are receiving are adequate in a way that we can see progress, we can see success, and that our kids feel and our students feel as if they have pride in those settings as well. And so, long story short, the conversations are having. We're looking at actions as well too. We've talked with superintendents to ensure and ask that they allow and ensure that our special education directors and coordinators are a part of those conversations, both at the district level, but also at the school level. And that's where we push. We help them to develop goals in those areas where we see fit, and we will continue to monitor those baseline components of the partnership agreement so that we can have those status checks to see what progress is being made. Are there any questions?
Not really. I'll defer.
Mr. Meese, what I wanted, and Ms. McRiddle, absolutely. And as I stated, that we're seeing lots of good things happening. We are not, as the PAC, we are not at all saying there's nothing happening. We're seeing lots of great things happening. Just like everything else, everything could improve. And we all agree with that. And sometimes, as you stated, that's more of a what is available in a school building is where are we going? So some of that is just we're seeing those things change all the time, and we're very happy with that. What I think a lot of what we're seeing, some of the direction stuff, Mr. Meese, is just parents are overwhelmed and they don't know where to turn, who to talk to, what to do. And instead of going and just venting at somebody at school, they're venting to other parents, so they feel that in some situations that coming and talking to the PAC it's a safe space where they can talk to another parent that's been there, walked in those shoes, and how can you help me? What do you know? So that's a lot of what we're seeing at this point. Not so much that SSD is not responding to that. I think we're seeing great strides, much different than we've seen in the last year or two. But what we're seeing is just more parents that are, I don't know where to turn. I'm at my wit's end and I just don't know what to do. And so they're venting to other parents. And that's where we're getting involved in getting them the resources before they want to jump off the bridge.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Thanks. And Rob, that was just to support you with the information that you were sharing, just to let them know from this angle, we're also advocating for the same things. And so I think that we're all on board to ensure that the delivery of services is at that level in which we all would like to see it. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more, Dr. Moore.
I guess the question to that, I know I don't like to drag these meetings out any longer than anybody else does, but is this going to impact and drive the direction of the agreements with the districts? You know, if you're having agreements with the districts that they, these things are available, these things are offered, this is the way it should be done. It doesn't sound like there's continuity. If the agreements are all basically the same, if there's no continuity between district to district, what is the, I mean, and I guess this is not necessarily directed at the PAC, but more to SSD itself, is what is the direction that the district is going to take to help mitigate these cracks that the kids are falling through, because it seems that there's a incontinuity throughout, best practice across the spectrum of the 22 districts. I know everybody's autonomous and everybody loves it that way, and I get it. It's, when it comes to things like this, quite frankly, it becomes problematic. And that's where if there's best practices out there that are working across the spectrum, but a few outliers are missing the mark because of X, Y, or Z, what are the remedies for those X, Y, and Z? And I guess that's, again, I may be off in the weeds, and I apologize to everybody. It's been a long day for me, but that's okay.
I'll make a comment around that, Mr. Meese, sorry. We have worked really hard to make sure we are supporting all of our 22 partner districts. The autonomy isn't so loose that it's not where we don't have accountability and expectations. And every one of our partner districts, when we met this year, sat down with the goals. Every one of the superintendents are committed to making sure that they are supporting the students and the special needs students in their district and all the services. Now, I think in terms of we're not expecting to have 100% of everybody, in a spot where there might be not any concerns. There's some concerns, but we are here to make sure we're supporting. We've got different avenues. We've got the PAC. We've also got our family, community, and engagement group. We've got multiple avenues for our parents to reach out and to be able to have conversations specifically about concerns. When you overemphasize and generalize things, I think that's when we start to get into the weeds where what rabbit hole are we going down? We want to make sure that we're specific around concerns and very specific issues and issues with each one of our students. And so that's why we're designed. We have a director in every one of our partner districts. We have coordinators that can support. We've got principals, we've got liaisons, and we've got superintendents that we're all working together to make sure that we're addressing every one of the needs. And so I think with the PAC, I really do appreciate that when concerns are brought to them, we work hand in hand with them. And we just want to make sure that we're continuing to support our PACs. Now, one thing that did come up in a lot of our agreement or beginning of the year meetings was some of our parents just don't have the time to have a PAC in our partner districts. So we talked with the superintendents and the liaisons about how do we make sure special education information is presented to our families when you're having an elementary or principal grouping together. So it's making sure that we're incorporating special ed in the mainstream conversations in each one of the partner districts so that we can make sure that any concerns, questions, information, parents have different avenues to that.
Okay.
Are there any additional questions for the Parent Advisory Council? Okay, moving right along. Our next agenda item is the superintendent report. Dr. Keenan, Strategic and Comprehensive School Improvement Plan first quarter updates.
Yes, thank you. So we have two updates today. The first one is our strategic plan and our CSIP plan, which is just in the initial stages. These were two plans that we adopted, our SSD board created over the last 2 years, and they adopted on July 1st of this year. So we are just going to update you on and reintroduce information that we are going to be tracking. Dr. Molly Bolton will be presenting that. She is our lead on making sure that we are looking at each one of our areas, and she'll describe where we're currently at with each one of our goals. Dr. Bolton?
Thank you, Dr. Keenan. Good evening, everyone. As Dr. Keenan said, I'm going to do the strategic plan and the comprehensive school improvement plan first quarter updates. Next slide, please. So basically, the scope of this presentation really is just to focus on what has happened in this past first quarter, which would be from when we adopted the plan in July to the middle of October. And just as Dr. Keenan said, this is the very first quarter of a 5-year plan. Next slide. So you may remember seeing this graphic when we adopted the strategic and comprehensive school improvement plan. A lot of districts only have one plan or the other plan. We do have both. When you look on as you're facing the screen, when you look on the left-hand side, you will see that that is the side for the strategic plan, and the right-hand side shows you what the comprehensive school improvement plan is. Basically, the strategic plan is that plan that is focused on the organization as a whole. So it includes our operations, facilities, all the aspects of the school district. And of course, it is aligned with our mission, vision, and values as a district. When you look at the comprehensive school improvement plan, it is more focused than the strategic plan, in that it really focuses on what are we doing for our students. So focused on student achievement, focused on student progress, and those sorts of things. And the CSIP plan aligns with the strategic plan, but more at the micro level of the student themselves. Next slide, please. So we'll start with our strategic plan process. Next slide. So our first goal for strategic plan is the implementation of effective strategic database systems that efficiently and equitably support instruction and operations. We have 2 strategies under that, and we've actually kind of worked these 2 strategies together. The big piece with this is we are developing our internal capacity for data systems, as well as our administrative skills for then using that data to set priorities and create action. So this is a plan that has been around as a project team for a while. One of the things we're doing in order to receive more data from our partner districts on how our students are doing is we are working through a grant with MoreNet, which is kind of a collaboration effort for the state of Missouri. And oftentimes we are able to utilize MoreNet to receive discounts on bulk pricing for different systems that different school districts in the state of Missouri use. But they have received a grant from EDFA, and we are working on a prototype for a data integration system where we will have nightly updates coming in from our student information systems and other systems that we have in our partner districts that will feed into a one system in special school district. And this will be a great way for us to share data back and forth on our students that special school district serves. So we're really excited about this. Another aspect of this group is they are working on some data governance. And so we have a committee together now that's exploring our data governance. We have a lot of data in special school district, and we just want to ensure that it is good data and we're able to use that data. So next steps that they're going to be working on as they're moving forward is really developing the scope of that data governance, because it can be very overwhelming. And then we are in the process of meeting with some of our partner districts to see if they would like to be a part of the grant with MoreNet. We are also doing a small pilot with Panorama on their student success platform to see if that could be a platform for data sharing as well. Next slide, please. For goal 2, we're looking at optimizing resources to equitably support students to meet their greatest potential. And we have 2 strategies that lie under that goal area. The first being identifying all the resources that our different departments utilize in special school district. And then that work will be given to the strategy team 2.2, and they will be working on processes to then utilize that data that we have to ensure that our resources are equitably distributed throughout our county. So you can see for the collection of the resources, we are getting ready to finish up some of that work and working on interviews with each one of those divisions about the materials and resources that they use. And then 2.2 is working on checking out the links between the other strategy and CSIP teams and really working on their theory of change to get started with their work. And that'll be kind of a theme you see on several of our new strategies that we're working on. Next slide, please. Goal 3 is all about communications and in making sure we have that two-way communication across our different stakeholder groups. We do have 3 strategies under this one. The first is business and agency and community partnerships. And so that group, we do have a new position that's just started last week, the community partnerships coordinator, and that person will be taking on this strategy as the lead. And right now they're working on their theory of change review. And then we have created an infographic for each partner district so that they can understand staffing and their student populations and the needs of the students that we service from each district. And those will be shared with their superintendents. Goal 3.2 is all about our family engagement pieces, and they are working through their theory of change. And they are actually doing a survey with our partner districts to find out where they are with family engagement within each partner district, so that we can gather that voice of customer data just to see how we're engaging families across the county, and then utilize that information with our quality indicators checklist. Our final strategy for goal 3 is to establish a communication system among departments and staff at all levels in special school district. And right now they are in the process of reviewing their theory of change. They have developed a newsletter specific for central office so that we can share across departments within central office. And we have switched to a new newsletter platform that will allow us better analytics to see how our newsletters that are going out, how they're being received and viewed. Next slide, please. This will take us into our comprehensive school improvement plan updates, which again, this is more student focused. Next slide. Our first goal is all around student success. And we do have 3 strategies for this goal. The first one is focused on positive post-secondary outcomes for our students. And so some things that they have just finished up. This was a strategy that has been carried over from our previous CSIP plan. So they're pretty far into their process. But they are working on conversation starters for what it means for a student to have a good life. And then also working on defining positive post-secondary outcomes and then determining the predictors for those. We do have what DESE uses as positive post-secondary outcomes. However, their definitions are somewhat limiting for our students who are not going to college or maybe entering the competitive work world or the military. And so we're looking at what are some other things that we would consider positive post-secondary placement. Our second strategy in this area is really looking at the connections between student data and research-based factors and how that's supporting student achievement. And this is a brand new team, and so they are in the process of setting their meetings up and establishing their scope and looking at that theory of change. 1.3 is engaging in collaborative planning with partners. And right now they are working on developing their design principles for their project, as well as reviewing that theory of change. Next slide, please. For goal number 2, we're looking at decision-making to make sure that we are providing students with supports. And so our first one is really looking around our philosophy. So developing that shared understanding of purpose And that should really help us with some clarity in programming decisions across the county. So right now they're collecting data around what is the current state of programming across the whole county in each district. And they're working on developing the tool to collect that data. The second strategy, this one's been around for a while. It's ensuring that our programming has evidence-based practices. And you can see they are working on finishing their theory of change and working on design principles for prototypes for some of the action plans that they have in place. Next slide, please. Our final CSIP goal is creating learning environments and systems that are responsive to those students who are highly mobile. We know, being special school district, that we service the whole county. And so that helps us to ensure our students who may be transient across districts in the county, we can be part of that equalizing factor for them. In that if we have those student data systems, we would be providing access to the new district that the student might be attending so that they can kind of hit the ground running instead of that district having to reassess that student, figure out where that student's entry level is, and program with them. So right now they're identifying the data that we could collect from our partner districts around student mobility, as well as some of those factors that would be good indicators, that would be good information for us to share. Next slide, please. So that is our updates for first quarter of our 5-year plan. What questions could I answer for you?
This is Debbie Hopper, Parkway. I'm not quite sure where this question fits in, but it's something that I've been struggling with the last few discipline hearings that we've had, and if the discipline process for SSD students is embedded anywhere in the strategic plan or the CSIP, or even with the PAC.
So I do think that that would be embedded in a couple of areas in our CSIP plan. First of all, that philosophy and programming area, I think will be definitely one of their data sources that they will be looking at is suspension data. And then also with our partnership agreements and looking at that data as well. And I do think us being able to share data across more easily will help us identify, suspension rates is one of the key performance indicators that we look at. And so that can help us identify and start having those conversations earlier, as well as putting some proactive pieces in place to help support those students before they get to the point of suspension.
Mm-hmm. And I guess with that, I don't know how other districts operate. We have, and I realize that from a legal standpoint, there has to be a manifestation hearing within 10 days of whenever a student is found to have suspendable behavior. And so I am curious about this process and if it's consistent across all partner districts, or if it's governed by each individual district. And the difficulty, the struggle that I've been having lately with these discipline hearings is that if a behavior has been deemed not a manifestation of the disability, we're supposed to look through the eyes of it as though the student is disciplined in the same fashion as any other student that doesn't have a disability. And I struggle with that because I don't know how you can unpackage that with a special needs student. So I'm just curious if things like that are going to be discussed, because to me, that all helps to ensure the success of the student and how they're treated in a discipline hearing through the whole discipline process, even getting to the point of needing to have a suspension hearing or an appeal in some of these cases to a long-term suspension and then deemed not a manifestation. So I was just I've been struggling with that for a while and wondering where that all might fall in here.
Mhm. So, as I said, it is a key performance indicator that we'll definitely be looking at that data and helping to proactively address it through evidence-based practices. To answer your very first question, I believe you asked if it was kind of consistent. The act of manifestation determination is actually through IDEA. And so, yes, that would be consistent across all students with the IEPs, no matter what district they are attending.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Are there any additional questions for Dr. Bowden?
Yes, I have a request that's a little more general than pertains just to this presentation. I've been in education for almost 40 years, and I'm seeing a lot of acronyms, not just in this presentation, but in quite a few tonight. And there are some that even with all my years in education, I don't know what they are. I pulled out a couple. There's DLT, EDFI, FE, quality indicators, CO newsletter, SRS process. Could we ask our presenters to consider spelling out those acronyms for our deeper understanding of what's being presented to us?
Absolutely, absolutely. And just a couple of those I can clear up for you. So the FE indicators are the family engagement indicators. Let's see, DLT is our district leadership team. SRS was our strategic response solutions process, and that is the process we used to design our CSIP plan.
Thank you. Thanks. If those were spelled out, I think
we really try to catch those, but sometimes it's so automatic for us, we miss them. So I apologize. We will work harder to do better with that.
I understand it. It's happening in a lot of presentations, and it happens everywhere. I just thought I'd bring it up tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Garrett Meese, Hancock Place. I know this is like really like out there, but from a long range CSIP plan, aside from the yearly, churning of the gears, and I know CSIP 6 is a lot more robust than everybody else has been used to recently. So from a long range goal of performance, I know that just getting people through high school in a regular school setting is difficult. It's astronomical in the special needs community. But the concern that I've had for a really long time is that at 21, they get strung to the top as far as they can go, and then they get cut off at the rope, and then they free fall into nothing. And our society as a whole suffers from that. I mean, we have strategic partners, strategic this. I mean, I know I'm not a director here, but from that perspective, it would be great to see a long range plan for strategic partnerships to find a landing for our students after they turn 21 and age out of the system and just free fall into nothing. I know that's been a problem that I've witnessed. I served on this council for 9 years prior to me being here again. So I know that this is not a today situation. It's been a long-term problem. And seemingly, if legislators won't do anything, we're left to figure out what we can do from a district standpoint. We do it at our local level the best we can. We do it at SSD the best we can. But is there any strategy for a long-term solution to the ever-present free fall that our students fall into at the end of their tenure.
And I think we are addressing that in the strategic plan as well as in the comprehensive school improvement plan. When we look at those community partnerships, a lot of those are businesses and agencies, and those partnerships, you know, part of the purpose of those, one of the purposes of those is to have those partnerships for our students when they graduate from us, so that we have those partnerships with them on the CTE side as well as the special education side, so that we can make sure we are preparing our students for those jobs and for those outcomes so they can be successful when they leave us. And I think the other goal underneath our comprehensive school improvement plan is that goal area 1, where we're really looking, and strategy 1, where we're really looking at determining, so what would be a good life for this particular student? And that's the whole team, the families and everything coming around and figuring out what is that good life. And let's identify that early in that child's educational career so we can be preparing them and helping the families be prepared for when they hit 21, they're not falling off that cliff, that they are supported and they have a plan in place and can be successful.
Okay, so the outreach is in also to the families themselves, because that's a lot of times that there's a disconnect, and I know that's what earlier the PAC concerns are, is that there's a disconnect between communication because I know I have a son with Asperger's. Sadly, he's 30 years old and he's living in his Jeep because I have a personal very, very personal situations going on, and I have zero ability to help him because, there was nothing at play through his, tenure through the system, through SSD, that connected everything, all the, sorry everybody. This is personal to me.
Can I just say, to help Garrett out here, I do understand what he's saying. There needs to be a bridge between aging out and getting into the real world. And our 2020 grads, I think, are being affected harshly also. I have a 2020 grad son who was utilizing SSD services, and it does kind of feel like they no longer have these supports in place once they're graduated. Now, for my son, it was earlier than the age of 21, but then where do you go? And especially if they're various different functioning needs. So it might be somehow helpful to parents to know what are those supports, and even have kind of a plan in the IEP perhaps, or one of their very last conversations in a transition plan to aid and help in bridging that gap between graduating and going out into the real world and no longer having that support. And some, unfortunately, as Garrett described, are going free falling, and others are just kind of straddling the rope. So I understand what he's saying there and what we might be able to do better to help with that.
Yep. And part of the IEP process, there is a transition plan that starts, at age 16. However, we're really encouraging families and really wanting to think about that sooner than 16, so that we can really be preparing families and preparing our students for that.
Yeah, and we do establish we're making sure that we're offering and supporting our families with the Charting the Life course. Our FACE group, our family and in community engagement group does do the trainings around that. And that does start behind, that curriculum, that process starts way before 16. So that's one of our goals, and that's why we've included in our strategic plan and our continuous improvement plan, our comprehensive improvement plan, that we support families and that we're having these conversations well before graduation, whatever age that is, if it's 18 or 21. But what you two are bringing up is how do we, when you have all these supports within our system, and once you move beyond it, it's kind of like when students go to college, there isn't the same supports, there isn't the same structure, there isn't the same legal priorities in terms of how we support our students. But for us, we're going to make sure we can do as much as we can to plan this out and to connect families with agencies and connect our students with where they want to go after they do graduate or age out at 21.
I do want to step back in here. I've regained some composure, and I want to explain one of the issues that I know that is a problem throughout our educational system as a whole, not just SSD, but as a whole in every district. The situation with what I have, I have an estranged situation where I have a divorce involved. The problem is school districts all across the country, not just in Missouri, but all across the country, deal with the situation of a divorce situation where they will only communicate with a custodial parent. That is a gross negligent violation of the rights of the other parent. And I had zero influence. I had zero communication, zero information given to me about anything that was going on with my child's education, because the system is designed to only communicate with a custodial parent, period, regardless of whatever. It's just your standard operation of practice. And everybody hides behind the defense. Oh, well, we're doing what the court order says. No, actually, you're not. The court order says that there's a custodial and a non-custodial. Means there's two parents involved. Whether you like it or not, you need to communicate with both parents. And not a single district that I'm aware of has ever done that, period. And that is one of the bigger problems that exists in our society. But this is a personal issue for me, and this is me. But I'm also an advocate for equal shared parenting rights in this country, and I know this is a 10-fold, 100,000-fold problem across our entire country. Had I known the things that were going on in his education, I could have stepped up and said, "Hey, we could probably do something different here." But I was never involved in an IEP conversation. I was never involved in any part of his education whatsoever, because I'm a non-custodial parent. That in and of itself is an egregious violation of my rights. So until everybody understands and gets this under their skin and realizes this is a much bigger problem, these are the problems that happen. Because it's hard enough with a child that doesn't have disabilities, but I know the extra stress that's put on a family with a child with disabilities, and often, not always, but often it ends up in a situation where not everybody's involved. The problem is you guys have a standard operating procedure that is extremely biased. So until you address that, because the law is actually on the side of both parents. The law is. Everybody just interprets it inappropriately and wrongly. So maybe you should focus on some of that stuff too, because I think that's going to help in some of your CSIP implementation. Because quite frankly, I mean, there are things, I could really tell you some horror stories that I will spare you of tonight. Okay, but trust me, there are a lot of things that go on that shouldn't go on because of the way the system is designed. I'll get off my soapbox now and let us return to the meeting.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, Mr. Mees. I think we all empathize with you and your situation with your son. I do see Dr. Aston, you have your hand raised. Did you want to speak?
Yeah, I know it's not my meeting, but I did want to just make a quick comment before, because I'm worried I'm going to forget about it. I just wanted to suggest, if we're not already doing this, that we might want to liaise with the Department of Mental Health and the regional center offices, where a lot of our adults are going to be getting their services. And so I'm not sure if we're doing that. If we are not, we should. If we are, I'd love to get an update at some point, not necessarily at this meeting, but at some point on what we're doing there, because that's one of the main ways our older, students, especially as they get into adulthood, are going to get their services. I think in St. Louis County, the other two places where a lot of kids get their services are Easter Seals and ARC. Those are two good places to go as well. Well, thank you that's my comment.
Thank you, Dr. Asner. And yes, we do partner with all 4 of those that are part of our partnership collaborations, but definitely we can work on getting you an update.
All right, thank you. If there's no more questions, we can move on to the budget update.
Yes, we are well into our budgeting process right now, and we are going to have Dr. Jeff Hogg, our Chief Operations Officer, kind of update the entire Governing Council on our process. We are not going to talk about specifics about information about different budgeting pieces, but we're just in the initial stages of that, and we wanted to make sure you were all updated on the process on how we make sure that we're really taking into consideration the unique needs in certain districts and how we're trying to make sure that equity is at the front of our discussions.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Keenan. Good evening, Governing Council. Again, my name is Jeff Hogg. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Special School District. Next slide, please, Rita. You'll see on this slide, and I just want to draw to your attention that we are funded by the same source as you are in your partner districts. You'll see our local, which is our taxes, our county, which is our fines, and then we receive state money as well. So we'll receive the foundation formula or the classroom trust fund, transportation or sales tax, which is known as Prop C as well. And then we receive federal funding in the form of IDEA, Part B, and Medicaid as well. We receive other monies on that last line, which is contracted services or other revenue. And that's our phase 2 money, which if a student is in a partner district, but more than 50% of their time is received or they are given special education, more than 50% of their time, we bill back a little bit for that, and then some tuition as well. So you can see these are last year's numbers. This is what you approved in June. So we're predicting about $489 million in revenue. And with recent taxes, we'll see what those look like in December and January, but we think that number might go up just a little. Next slide, please. And then we have expenditures in the same 5 categories as a partner district would as well. You'll see those where it's certified salary, and that's our staff or any member of our teaching staff that has a certificate. Then we have our non-certified staff, and that falls under hourly. And then you can see our salaries total. You can see our fringe benefits, and that's anywhere from health insurance to retirement. And then purchase services, and that is our trainings or any other service that we need to go outside of our own district for. And then again, supplies. Capital outlay is the same as what you'll have in your district, and that is to erect buildings, do renovations, and different capital improvements like that. So you'll see we're showing about a $509 million expenditure for FY23. We think that'll probably come in a little bit lower, but we'll keep you guys informed of that as we go through as well. Next slide, please, Rita. And so these are the 4 goals that our budget committee creates. Our budget committee is made up of 2 of our board members, Dr. Keenan, myself, and 3 members from our accounting department. And so as we go through and we start to build the budget, we really base what we do and what our directors and principals do on these 4 goals. And so the first one is equity. That's our main commitment from our district this year. So the district budget committee believes that should be the first one when we're building budgets as well. And then staffing, we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. Curricular support, and we put some changes to that. And then our facilities as well. With the population that we serve, we want our students to be welcomed in our facilities as well as safe and accessible. Next slide, please. And so with staffing, as you can see over the last several years, in 2021, we added 80 positions, 2021, 22, 93 and a half, and then last year, 53. We've reduced positions over the years as well, 74.2. Those were all through vacancies or attrition. And we'll show you how that impacts partner districts here on the next slide. And so you see on the top there that the 42 that we added last year were in partner districts, whether it was teachers or paraprofessionals or coordinators. And then you see in that bottom section where we have assistant director of equity, human resources, paraprofessional coach, translation coordinators, really all of those with the exception of the bottom 3 all support partner districts as well. And so with the number that we added last year, that was the main goal, was to really support our partner districts with the additional staffing. Next slide, please. And so as we begin to build a budget, we have some major revenue assumptions. 2023, so next fall will be a reassessment year. That's where we see generally a $7 to $9 million gain in local revenue. So as personal property or real estate is reassessed, that increases as we go. So we'll see a jump next year in that. DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, has a student adequacy target that plays into the formula that you and that we receive money based on student population on. That has not been changed in 4 years. It's $6,375. And so we think that there's going to be a push this spring to get that increase, to take into consideration the inflation that has taken place over the last 6 to 8 months. And then we're hearing, and we believe that transportation will be fully funded again as it is this year. And that'll make a big difference as we continue. Our investment earnings, we're going to see a current year increase. And as well, as long as interest rates stay up, we will see an increase as we go. Just for some examples, we are about 2.3 million higher than where we were last year at this time. And for another example, we build out an investment ladder, generally about 6 months with different chunks of money set aside to come due each month. And so as we do that, in March, when we put money aside, we were getting a 0.06% interest rate. Now we're getting a 3.8% interest rate on that money. So that just kind of shows you how that's changed a little bit. So we'll keep an eye on the investment earnings. And then Medicaid revenue, we project that we'll receive between 9 and 10 million next year again, as we received this year. That increased from about 3 or 4 million this past year, just due we were able to bill a little bit more through what Medicaid made available. And so that's why we saw that big jump. Next slide, please. And so major expenditure assumptions, we just talked about revenue. The expenditures, we'll begin our negotiations in January and February. We are set to negotiate with each one of our unions, each one of our bargaining units. So we will see what that does. This past year, or the past cycle, we negotiated a 2-year contract. And over that time, it averaged about a 4% increase over those 2 years each year. So we're probably looking in that range again, if not a little bit more. So we'll keep you in line or involved with that. Our benefits will continue to increase, but we don't have a percentage yet. So we'll put in about 3% and see if it goes up from there. But that generally falls in that 3 to 5% range. And then disproportionality, which we'll explain in a slide or two here, we'll continue that for the 2023 and 2024 years. Next slide, please. So as we continue to budget, we have focused on zero-based, and that really gives us, it gives our directors, it gives our principals an opportunity to take a look at their budget and let their budget or let their goals drive our budget, as opposed to us from central office saying, here's your money, here's what you can spend, try to fit your goals in there. We want them to tell us what they need, and then we make the budget work around that. And there's three parts of that. There's needs, what it takes to provide the basic curriculum. There's wants, what they're doing now to provide the current robust curriculum. And there's enhancements, which is how can they make the education they're providing right now even better. So we'll continue to look at zero-based budgeting, and we'll continue to look at the focus with three different tiers. The first tier being all SSD schools and all SSD partner districts. The next tier, or tier 2, will focus on our 11 schools that receive disproportionality money. And then our tier 3 are our high needs districts, and there are 8 of those, and we'll kind of talk about them here in a second as well. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we want our budget to align with strategic goals. We basically want our principals and directors to say, this is what our partner district is doing, this is what we're doing, this is what we need to fund. We want them to look at every expenditure to see if they need it or if it needs to be increased. One of the cool things about zero-based budgeting is it really allows principals and directors to say, we have historically purchased this this support, and it hasn't made a difference over the last 5 years. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of that and use this support that better supports our goals. So that is one of the things about zero-based budgeting that allows our directors to change what we spend money on based on needs and goals. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, we have 11 districts that receive disproportionality money, and you can see those on the screen. Next slide, please. And so disproportionality exists when students in a racial or ethnic group are more likely to be identified as a student with a disability, a particular disability, placed in more restrictive setting, or suspended or expelled at a greater rate than students in other ethnic groups. And so DESE runs numbers and looks at it every year, and they'll send out letters to us and to partner districts about what those ratios look like. And if you are over those ratios, then you need to set aside 15% of your IDEA money to address those needs. Next slide, please. And so as you can see on this slide, again, like I said, 15%, and that comes out to about $5.9 million. We receive about $40 million annually in our IDEA funds. So we set aside $5.9 million for our partner districts. We need to identify and address factors that contribute to that. We are allowed to serve students ages 3 through 12th grade with and without disabilities. And that's the key to this, is that the money going to our partner districts may not serve only children with disabilities. It needs to serve all students to help with the four items we had on the previous page. And what we do here is Ms. Moore always works with our partner districts, and the way that she says it very well with them, is that you know your district better than we do, come up with a plan, and we will fund it. And so that is really what we're doing with disproportionality. And I'll show you how that money breaks down. Next slide, please. For this year, we put a little bit more money into disproportionality. The budget was $5.85 million, plus with some of the one-time money that's still out there. In this case, the American Rescue Plan, we had an additional $1.2 million. So the total budget this year is 7.06. Next year, and Ms. Moore and I have already been meetings with directors to let them know that that's going to reduce back down to that 5.9 range because of that one-time money that's going to go away. And so I'll show you how the budgets work for the particular districts. Next slide, please. And so you'll see here on the top there, you'll see the $5.9 million. And then if you look to the left, you'll see the column that says the district name. Those are the 11 districts plus SSD. And then you'll see the student count in the next column to the right. And then that percent allocated to the disproportionality. So that 10.1% of the students in that column to the left are for Ferguson Florissant. So Ferguson Florissant is going to receive 10.1% of money set aside for disproportionality. So you can see in that column where it says allocation, you can see the amount of money that each school district is going to receive. If you look in that next column with the blue numbers, you'll kind of see some additional money added in. We know we're going to have carryover, and we know that that some districts aren't going to spend all of their disproportionality money. And so what we do, and we'll talk about it in tier 3, we're able to add some extra disproportionality money to some of the school districts who have come forward with a plan that said, we would like this to address our disproportionality needs. Sometimes those plans are a little bit more than the allocation. So we then take and add some extra money so that they can carry out the plan that they came to us with. And so then you'll see the red and black numbers. Those are how some districts have decided to spend money. Some are heavy on positions and others are heavy on programs. And again, that goes back to, we allow the district to decide the best way to look at that, and then we fund it. And so you'll see over on the right side, that final column is that after you back out personnel, that's how much a district has remaining to spend on either programs or supplies.
Before you change the screen, can you tell me what can you kind of like go over what those headings are, the MTSS? What is MTSS?
So that's multi-tiered support. So that's
Okay.
a position. And then there's teachers, paras, interventionist, instructional coach, speech language pathologist, school psychs, behavior specialist, and social workers.
Okay.
So disproportionality is very specific with what you can and cannot spend your money on. And so it falls under those groups. And then once you're going to spend it on a program or supplies, it has to fall under specific. And there's guidelines that we share with everyone as well. But I'm glad you asked that, because that's what those positions are that school districts have chosen to support their district with.
Would a speech language coach be the same as a person that helps with I just lost my train of thought. I think I know what it is, but it's a person that helps a student maybe that has difficulty. I know what it was called at one time. It'll come back to me. You can go ahead. I apologize.
All right. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then these are our tier 3 districts. Next slide, please, Rita. And so a couple of years ago, we really wanted to make sure that we were supporting all of our districts and providing what we could for districts that really were needing it. So we looked at what was from the Economic Innovation Group, and they talked about the Stressed Community Index. Basically, this is information about a community at a zip code level. And so this Economic Innovation Group took all of this local data, some of, like high school diploma rates, poverty rates, adults not working, housing vacancy rates, median household income, change of employment, change of establishment, and they assigned it points and they put it into the formula. And so you'll see that like 0 to 20 is prosperous, 20 to 40 is comfortable, 40 to 60 is at mid-tier. And then when you get to the 60 or 80, you're starting to have some zip codes and communities that are at risk. 80 to 100 is where they're distressed. And so what we wanted to do was make sure that we were providing supports for those districts as they needed them and as they request them and as we could help. And so that's where some of those blue colors or those blue numbers in that column on the disproportionality page came in. And then some of the other things we do in this case, next slide, please. We developed that framework, and then in collaboration with the partner district, we provide additional supports. We look at achievement data. We look at Dr. Bolton's group, and they do instructional audits. And then we look at additional initiatives, and then what kind of staffing we can place. We had a district that generally, when we look at adding staff, we look at like a 17-to-1 ratio. So 1 teacher per 17 students on a caseload. Well, theirs was much lower than that, and we wouldn't have added one normally, but they were a tier 3 district, and it made sense. So they were splitting a teacher between two buildings, and they could really, as part of their plan, address what they needed. So for example, we added a teacher there. Next slide, please. And then again, what we're looking with our tier 3 is what additional materials, what type of professional development, and what type of coaching can we provide? Next slide, please. And so with our curriculum and with our purchasing, we realized that we were having individual groups, individual districts, individual schools purchase curriculum. And we were not buying it in mass, which we should have been with the amount of money we spend on curriculum. And so with Dr. Bolton's help and our accounting department's help, and then with Doug Austin's help with technology, we've streamlined and centralized purchase for both curricular and technology. Last year, we were able to save quite a bit of money, plus have a lot of free items given. So they sent numerous teachers' guides and support workbooks for our curriculum. And this year we saved about $80,000 by purchasing in mass. So we're really streamlining our centralized purchasing process for both curriculum and technology. And then Dr. Bolton and her team has put together resource guides for math and literacy, social, emotional, and autism, so that we ensure that schools across the district, wherever you're located, have access and are getting the same best practices. Next slide, please. And then again, just kind of the calendar. September to November was when the budget cycle was open. We offered weekly Q&A sessions in case any directors or principals needed to jump on and ask questions. It was actually kind of cool. Some people would just jump on just to listen in case somebody had a question that would spur their thought process. In December, the budget closed on the 2nd. And so now Cynthia Vaughn and other members of the accounting team are putting those together. We've already had a couple initial budget presentations from some of our principals and directors. And then in January, Dr. Keene and myself, Ms. Moore, Ms. Pendergrass will all be on calls. Mr. Boyd's on there as well to work through and listen to what our partner districts are requesting for support and what their budget's going to look like. So then after January, we will come to our Board of Education for a preliminary approval in February so that we can bring together what we believe is going to be revenue, expenditures, and then positions, additional positions that we ask for, so that we can begin to hire throughout the spring and not wait until a final budget's approved in June. So we'll have, like I said, final presentations with partner districts in January, a preliminary budget for approval by our Board of Education in February, and then we'll bring that budget to you in March. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
This is Veronica Morrow-Real from Riverview Gardens, and I do have a question. I understand that the disproportionality figures, you said that students don't necessarily have to be SSD students to benefit from those. But I would like to know if you can tell me or suggest what amount would you feel should be allocated towards students that are receiving SSD services versus the amount that should be used towards students that are not?
I don't know if there's a specific rate, but what this does is this allows our partner districts to help address holistically across the school supports for students who are, right on the cusp of being identified for special education, or who are, on the cusp of that suspension. And so what that does, whether it is an SSD student or a regular education student, we're providing that money and that support in that regard there.
Okay, so then we can ask within our own districts basically how they have that money allocated.
Yes.
Okay.
And we have a plan for each one of those districts, and we've talked with every one of them when we met at the goal meeting at the beginning of this year. the liaisons had to come up with their plans on how they were going to utilize these funds. And like Dr. Hogg said, these funds are for the districts to come up with their plan to support students who are not in special education, but to be able to look at how do we support, schools like the multi-tier systems of supports, social workers, social emotional learning, but it's for students who are not in special education, so that the only means to have a student receive supports is to have them identified through special ed. So these are
Okay.
really this is dictated through the federal government funds. This is a requirement that they say with disproportionality that you have to utilize so much of a percentage of your funds to be able to utilize for students who are not in special education.
Okay, and that's the figure that I was looking for. So I would have to get that from our CFO and our superintendent.
Yeah, they are the directors. Yes, the
Yes.
liaison and your superintendent has that. We presented
Bingo.
that to them at the last meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Hogue, this is Debbie Hopper from Parkway. I have a couple of questions. I've got a little lost on how does DESE determine you said that DESE sends information that identifies a disproportionality for the district, but how does that work again?
DESE has an equation that they utilize, and it's really about the number of students who are identified for special education. They look at it racially, how the breakdowns are. That's one category. So if you're identifying students, like a particular group of students, African-American students, in a higher rate in particular for special education, or in a particular category in special education, like an intellectual disability, which some of our districts have been identified through that. So it's really about the practices of the district and saying you're disproportionate because you are actually referring students and African-American students at a higher rate than if you were white students going into special education. The same thing goes and applies for suspension dismissal rates. So you see that you're identified that one of the other categories is they look at the overall district suspension rates, and are you suspending students in special education and particular races of students at a higher rate than your other groups of students. So DESE does the notification. They send it out to the partner districts and they let us know, since we are the special ed entity, that we need to work on a plan. We've been doing this for 3 years with our partner districts, going on 4 years. And so this is not a new conversation that we've been having with our partner districts.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Just to finish up my questions on that, on the slide that showed the number of the count to allocate the disproportional funds, is that the total number of SSD students in the district?
It's the number of special education students identified in the district. Okay. And there's a dollar amount that's equalized for all of them. And so the percentage that you saw on there was the overall, like Parkway, that is a larger district, so they have a larger percentage of the overall disproportionality dollars. It's not the percentage of students identified in Parkway, it's the percentage of the overall amount that we have allocated for the disproportionality, and it goes out equally to each district. So every district receives the same amount per student.
Okay. And then my other question had to do with monitoring this, because it seems like based on the numbers, if I understand it correctly, we have 11, I think you said 11 districts in tier 2 and 8 districts in tier 3.
Tier 3 is not a DESE designation. The tier 2 is the DESE designation of disproportionality.
Okay. So we have basically half of our partner districts falling into a disproportionality situation, right? But I understand that correctly. So it seems like, I'm not sure if it almost seems like we would not want to be in that category. So is there any success, is there any monitoring over time to see if this is improving within the districts, or, to see what their success rates are to decrease their disproportionality rates over
Yeah.
time?
Yeah, there was a requirement to report out to DESE. I think there's one that's reported out in December that we have to give them updates on each one of the plans of the partner districts, and they have to submit those to DESE to determine, and DESE pulls the data to determine if they're improving or not.
Okay. And are there any repercussions to not improving or even getting worse? Does DESE do anything about that?
You stay in that disproportionality status.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah. It's a 900-pound gorilla in the room. I got to ask a question because I think it's relevant, but I'm sure there's an answer for it just because I'm sure there is. There are districts within our community that are disproportionate, but the question I have is, because the underlying question has been, or the statement has been, in the communities where the discrepancy has been toward the African American community, in communities that the district is predominantly African American, where is the disproportionate values placed upon that scenario? And again, I know that the problems in this country, in this city, and everywhere else exist, so I'm not just disqualifying any of that. I'm just looking at the predominant, African American school districts. If the proportionate is in the opposite direction, is that also being equated in this equation?
DESE has the federal government determines the determination of the information, and DESE has to go through it. So this is really truly a DESE designation through this process.
Okay, that's not a problem. It's not an easy conversation. It's just part of the conversation.
Did anyone else have a question? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. We're back to the budget. And we have approval of the FY23 budget adjustment.
Yeah, what we're bringing forward this evening is just some simple budget adjustments that as we move through the process of the end of last year and into this year, we've added some additional money. Some of it was for our DEIA work that as we built that department, we added. Some of it was for some maintenance. And then when we reorganized the Office of Employee Success and Engagement, we needed to add a little bit of money there. So just some very simple additions as we go.
Do we need a motion to approve or?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Can I get a motion?
Make a motion for Hancock Place.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mees. Can I have a second, please?
Second, Riverview Gardens, Veronica Morrow Rio.
All right. Thank you, Veronica. Any additional questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right. Next up, we have approval of the FY23 revised budget.
Oh, that is just a separate entity where what we just talked about was revising it. The second part is where it's actually revised in the book. So it's the same money.
So can we get a motion to approve the FY23 revised budget?
Motion, Hancock Place.
Thank you, Mr. Mees. Can I get a second?
Second.
Danny Edgar Afton.
Thank you, Mr. Edgar. Any additional questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up, we have the SSD Board of Elections discussion.
So we have 3 board members that are up for election. We have Dr. Cuneo, who is in sub-district. I'm looking over here at sub-district 2. So he has Bayless, Afton, Hancock Place, and Melville. We also have sub-district 1, which is Hazelwood, Jennings, and Maplewood, Richmond Heights. And that is Curtis Faulkner. And then we have sub-district 7, which has changed slightly. It was Rockwood and Ladue, now it is Rockwood and Clayton, and that is Dr. Asner. So our filing begins on tomorrow, actually, at 8 a.m. And we are, it ends on the 27th of December. We will have the elections with the governing council on March 6th.
Are there any additional questions regarding the board SSD elections? Okay, hearing none. We have calendar of events. The governing council meeting calendar. So our upcoming meetings are on Monday, March the 6th, which will be the elections, as Dr. Keenan just stated, as well as a preliminary budget and budget goals. Then our final meeting of the year is June the 5th, which is also on a Monday, and that's the final approval of the budget, approval of the CSIP plan. We will reorganize for officers, and then we will also hold our governing council orientation. Are there any questions? Okay, hearing none. Our next agenda item is announcements. Does anyone have any announcements? Okay, hearing no announcements. We're up for adjournment, but before we adjourn, I want to remind everyone that we will go into breakout sessions after the adjournment, where the members of the governing council have the opportunity to meet with the members of the SSD Board of Education. And there is 30 minutes allotted. Don't feel like you need to take the entire time. However, that time has been made available to you. So if there's no additional questions or discussion, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion, Hancock Place.
All right, thank you. Can I have a second?
Second, Hazelwood.
I heard Hazelwood. And all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, and you should be getting a your little breakout session box to pop up shortly.
Can I mention
and there
something, Keisha?
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I know last time a lot of you had said, oh, we felt like we just were cut out of our breakout rooms. The way the breakout rooms go are you have 30 minutes. Some of you have more of you. And if you don't have the time, 30 minutes, you don't need to take the full time, like as Keisha said. Please look at the corner up in the right-hand corner of your screen. It will show you the actual minutes that and it will cut back where it will count down the amount of minutes you have left in the breakout session. The last 5 minutes, there'll be a pop-up on your screen. It'll say you have 5 minutes left. And then it'll come back up where you have like 30 seconds. So it will end at that 30 after that 30-second countdown, but just to warn you to watch for those pieces. So look up in the corner, and then it also does warn you when it's down to 30 seconds too. 5 minutes and 30 seconds. And like I said, you know, you do not need to spend the whole 30 minutes. We wanted to just be able to create enough time for those districts or sub-districts that have like 3 or 4 or even 5 members that are sitting in there. We do have Dr. Asner. We do not have your Clayton or Rockwood, so you are excused for the rest of the day.
Does anybody, I mean, I'm happy to join another
You want to
session.
join one?
I mean, I look, I'll go to sleep early happily any night, but if I don't know, I'm happy to talk to folks if they have questions.
Thank you. We appreciate that. I guess Rita can put you in whichever group.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start
the
the breakout
lottery.
rooms.
We'll randomly select one for you.
Sounds good.
All right, so
Okay.
we'll just wait for our box to pop up and go to our groups.
Here we go. So as of right now, sub-district 1 and sub-district 3 each have 2 people.
Mark, you can
Yes.
put Dr. Asner in sub-district 1, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, here he goes. And then we have a Kevin Langley, who's not assigned,
And Mr. Kavanaugh.
and Mr. Kavanaugh.
Kevin Langley is Hazelwood, so he's in sub-district 1.
Okay, and Kavanaugh.
Kavanaugh.
Kirkwood.
Okay, Kirkwood, okay.
Kirkwood.
Dr.
Come on,
Byers.
Rita, you should know
Dr.
that.
Byers, who is, what is she, sub-district 5?
Yep. 5.
See you guys.
All right, have fun.
There he goes.
Should the stream stop?
Yeah. I'll go ahead and stop that.
Perfect. Okay,